Feel it in your soul. The Mark Thompson Show.
Oh, it is Friday, and that means political discussion that I wait for all week long. Let us welcome our guest. You know Jim Avila. He is a Peabody, Emmy, and Edward R. Murrow award-winning journalist, a former senior correspondent at ABC News, veteran White House correspondent. He's amazing. He's Jim Avila. Welcome.
Morning.
Hi. This next guest, you know as well, he's forgotten more about politics than most of us will ever know. He's Michael Shure, everybody.
Smashed it.
Hey, guys.
Hi. So we're waiting for the Supreme Court ruling that hasn't come down. I don't know when it will, but I've been kind of watching that this morning. Any thoughts about the Supreme Court and decisions today?
Jim,
I don't know which one you're talking about, Kim.
I'm talking to both of you. Anybody with an opinion, chime in.
No, I don't know which Supreme Court ruling you're talking about yet.
So there was two that were expected today. One ruling was on the president's student loan forgiveness, and the other one was on using affirmative action in college entry.
Well, those are big ones, and
yeah.
I didn't realize they were coming down today, but
they're not. Apparently, they didn't rule. So
okay, so
yeah,
we have to continue to wait.
We do.
The student loan one has been controversial because I guess there's a lot of resentment out there from people who paid their student loans, and now they think that everybody should be punished by banks, since they were. So we'll see what happens with that. I personally, believe that college should be free. So, I'm Mr. Progressive. So I guess I should move to Norway or to Sweden, but it's too damn cold. I like the weather too much in LA. And the other one, the thing. Well, go ahead, Michael. You go ahead and talk.
I think what the thing to talk about that Jim and I talk about a lot is politics here. What are the politics of these rulings, right? I mean, whatever the court rules, if you go beyond the substance of it, which agreeing with Jim on how college should be paid for, and if we do it right, and if there should be forgiveness of student loans, it's a slippery slope because you could forgive student loans, and then tomorrow you start giving them again. What happens to the people going forward? Is it essentially going to be done again in X number of years? But the political side of it is what is fascinating going into an election. The president, regardless of this ruling, is going to say that he fought for this. He's going to be able to have this as he goes after younger voters, recent college graduates, college students, be able to say that. Similarly with the affirmative action, which has been challenged at different times, actually has lost ground in most recent cases. It's still something the president can say. We have to make sure that the courts uphold this as he goes out and campaigns. Similarly, for whoever the Republican opponent is, they're going to try and make hay out of these rulings. But the substance of them, you can believe what you want. This court ruled yesterday on indigenous peoples in a way that they didn't think they would rule. Not as big a case, not as well known. So activist judges, if that is in fact what we have, activist justices, the court leans away from that on what are considered two somewhat progressive issues.
So Biden starts his campaign. This first big campaign event is on Saturday in Philadelphia, and that's among labor unions, which is his other strength. And labor unions are getting stronger a little bit now. There's a bit of a turn toward the American worker, and I think Joe Biden wants to capitalize on that. It's going to be interesting. What's going to be most interesting there, though, I think, Kim, is whether or not Joe Biden mentions in any way the Trump indictment, Trump arraignment. He's been very careful to avoid that. Yeah. I think that's a good strategy to avoid it. Let it proceed just on the facts. There's no reason to capitalize it. It speaks for itself. There's no reason for Joe Biden to come out and say anything about it.
Yeah, no, I think he has to distance himself as much as he can from that. Did you see, though, speaking of Trump, The stop that he made, and I think we have video of this, right after he leaves the Miami courthouse, he goes to this little restaurant called Versailles. It's in Little Havana. And he goes in there and he's got a bunch of supporters there and they're all happy to see him and slapping him on the back. And he shouts, "Food for everyone," as if he's paying. Well, I guess everyone orders food, and guess who skips out on the bill? Yes, Trump skips out on the bill.
It was just a platform, right? He wants food for everyone. He wasn't saying that he's going to buy food for everyone.
Yeah.
Versailles.
There's a long line of debtors for Donald Trump, starting with the Polish workers who built
Trump
the
Tower.
Polish guys who constructed all of his buildings in New York, and every lawyer that he's employed. They're all looking for money from Donald Trump. So it's a long line. They're going to have to wait for a while.
Versailles, by the way, not a small restaurant. Just so it's not. It is in Little Havana, but it's not a little restaurant. It's a 24-hour institution in Little Havana.
Oh, okay.
And Little Havana is a stronghold of Republican support traditionally. Though the Cuban vote went to Barack Obama in 2012, and so it's not automatic. Younger Cubans aren't what the older Cubans were, but they did come back to the fold for Republicans in congressional races and in the presidential race in 2020. So they'll have to see how that goes. But yeah, Donald Trump skipped out on a bill, as Jim said, not the first time he has done.
Yeah.
Well,
I lived in Miami for 3 years. The Versailles is an institution there, and is a political institution because, as Michael says, of all the stronghold of Little Havana, where, yes, the older Cuban population, the ones who escaped the Cuba they didn't love anymore when the communists took over and when the mafia was kicked out, that stronghold remains pro-Republican. But I was also married to a Cuban American from Miami, a lovely woman who is kind of a symbol of the younger generation of Cubans down there. And as Michael says, that's really changed. The Democrats are making great inroads among the Cuban population. Trump did a pretty good job of stirring up, the anti-communism, by calling Democrats communists. That's what he campaigned on in Florida. It was successful because there's a lot of people from Venezuela there. There's a lot of people from Cuba, and they are just escaping, or many of them had escaped a Cuban regime that they didn't. So it's for a longer discussion because what happened in Cuba, and I of course covered Cuba for years, and what happened there is not as simple as Fidel Castro. What Fidel Castro, while he was a dictator, yes, it is the only country in the Caribbean with a high literacy rate, a high medical rate, where birth rate is very high. The healthcare and education in Cuba is phenomenal. Their economy is in big trouble. It has been for many years because their big brother to the north has an embargo on them, and they can't get any goods. It's pretty tough. So it's a very complicated situation. But the Republicans have been able to take advantage of that.
So one of the things we're talking. Oh, I'm sorry, Michael Shure. Go ahead.
Yeah, Cuban identity. I want to add on to what Jim is saying. Another complicating part of this is, as immigration has risen as a debate, Cuban self-identification as not being part of a wave of Latinos and Hispanics coming across the border puts them in a different bracket, and they want to identify separately from the other what we think of as Hispanic immigrants here. And so that has gone toward pushing many of them toward Republicans because of that debate. And it has nothing to do with politics as much as sort of sociological identification.
Speaking about Trump, one of the things that I noticed is his wife has been absent. So he's been in the courtroom. He's been
Except
speaking
for
in
on
New
Fox
Jersey,
News.
except for there.
She did make an appearance on Fox News, but they
She's not.
misidentified an aide as Melania.
She's not a dutiful wife standing by her husband. You see these politicians accused of sexual misconduct, and the wife stands by their side with a somber look on her face. This whole, she's been kind of silent, except for maybe one interview. She has been, when he was in Miami in a courtroom, she's in New York. So she's not, I don't know if she's supporting him or if she's busy or what. What does that say about, what's going on? Jim?
What did the back of her coat say? I don't care. That's pretty much been, it's been pretty much Melania Trump's mode of operation since she's become the first lady. I mean, you didn't see her much there either at staged events on occasion. She's not, we've seen those memes and those pictures of her pulling away from her hand away from Donald Trump. It's never been the perfect marriage that we can tell. There have been some shots of her having dinner with Donald in Mar-a-Lago, in the roped off area there that they had the dining room table in. But she's aloof and she's stoic, and I don't think we're ever going to see her come out, especially after what happened in New York. The charges against him of paying off a porn star. That's not something you're going to have, unless you believe it's not true. And I don't know how you can believe it's not true after all of this. She's not going to stand up next to him.
It's definitely not the Hillary Lewinsky response, right? I mean, it's way different. Michael Shure?
Yeah, it is. It's also, 26 years later, 27 years later, whatever it is. I think that it also doesn't really matter. I think it's such a subplot to the history that was made in that courtroom that it is the kind of distraction that obviously we naturally look at. But I don't think it really matters. It doesn't mean she's not supportive. It doesn't mean she has said that she is gung-ho about the White House run. She has said that she stands by her husband's politics. And she has taken kind of a back seat to a lot of what we typically see. There's nothing typical about the way that the Trumps operate, but what we saw in court the other day, what we didn't see, but what we know happened in court was the real argument and the real exclamation point on why a Trump presidency is not what the country needs right now. And it's not because he and Melania aren't getting along.
Let's go back to New York, because the second Trump defamation trial brought by E. Jean Carroll is now being set for January of 2024. She's already awarded $5 million in this earlier trial against Trump. And because then he goes and opens his mouth and spouts off more, she's asking for another $5 million. How does this play into everything that's happening during this candidacy?
Well, you wonder why he can't keep a lawyer, right? I mean, every single time he can't listen to what the court does. He is a rogue defendant, and he cost himself this money. That she had the right to go back to court because of the fact that he spoke about her in a defaming way after the trial, and so she reapplied to extend the damages because he kept damaging. And then you see in Florida, he can't get a lawyer to go to his arraignment. Lawyers quit on him all the time. Some of them turn on him as well because he is that kind of a client. So no surprise here, and she'll probably get a lot more money.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is that politically, the New York charges, while damaging, are not what's going on in Florida. What's going on in Florida, with Jack Smith and the federal government charges, those are hard to explain away. But the Republicans themselves are even beginning to have trouble. While they initially came out when the indictment was announced and claimed this was a witch hunt and a government selective prosecution. There's still some of that going on among the far right, but you're beginning to see cracks in this. Tim Scott has said there are serious charges. Nikki Haley has said that he has endangered our troops, but then again, she says she'll pardon him. Mike Pence has gone a little further. Of course, Chris Christie's right there. And even in Congress, there have been people who have said they can't defend him on this. And I think these charges are really going, as opposed, I'm interested to see what the polling says over the week, probably get some polling over the weekend on the Sunday shows to see whether or not he got the similar kind of bump he got in New York that he's getting in Florida.
Oh, you're muted, Michael Shure.
Yeah, already his numbers are have taken a little bit of a hit since the indictments, and while Jim's right and people have kind of tested the waters on what it's like to criticize Trump, there hasn't been a vocal mob against what he has done. And I think, speaking, as someone who covers political campaigns and that sort of thing, that's the risk these people have to take. Being careful for Nikki Haley is not going to get her the presidency or the nomination.
You might get her vice president, but it's not going to get her president. That's what they're.
I think the ship has probably sailed on vice president, to be frank, for her, but that's another conversation. I don't think sticking with Trump is going to get her the presidency. I don't think, and I've got to be clear, I don't think going after him is going to get her the nomination either. But if that's what you believe, stick to it, because you are going to get some independent voters who come out in these primaries that or moderate Republicans who are going to vote for you over this guy if you are right about it. And, I think it's a risk worth taking for somebody.
I was watching the video of this radio show where the host interviewed Mike Pence and asked him specifically, would he pardon Trump should he be convicted of federal charges? And Trump doesn't commit one way or the other and actually talks about the damaging nature of the charges. And the host then comes back on and, he's got his listeners or viewers saying all kinds of things like, you heard it here, we uncovered the truth about Pence, he's not a Trump supporter. There's a base of people that if these candidates don't say they would issue a pardon, they're going to be vilified by the Trump mob.
Yeah, I think that what's shifting here is, as I said before, what you see in the indictment, those things are hard to defend. They can't defend them, what he's accused of doing. So what they're trying to do is, what they're doing instead is shifting the argument. And now the shift is, Hugh Hewitt today wrote in the Washington Post, that prosecuting a president is bad for the country and they should just let it go, that this is all bad for the country, that we should pardon him, let him go. So they're not arguing about the substance of the charges. What they're arguing is whether or not the country, whether a Democratic president should be prosecuting a Republican candidate against him. And we'll see whether that holds anything at all. Even as progressive as I am, I would be open to a deal if he would do a deal where he would, promise, okay, you can stay out of jail with an ankle bracelet, but you cannot run for president, and you cannot, you cannot be on social media. If he would accept a deal like that, then he can avoid prison. But he won't. The only thing he said is that he's open to a deal if they pay me damages, if they apologize to me. Well, that's not going to happen. So he's very far away from that. But am I okay with not putting the country through a trial like this and putting the country through the damage that there is of this? Yes, but under some very strict conditions that he will not agree to.
And there's so much in what Jim just said, and the question you asked him. I mean, Clay Travis has a right-wing audience of people that listen to his show. Most of those people would sooner pardon Donald Trump, but would never pardon Mike Pence. They think that he is actually the person who is beyond pardon because for having certified the election in the first place. So you're already going up against a mob there, and there's false equivalency between Watergate and Nixon being pardoned and and pardoning Donald Trump. There was the morass of Watergate, the length of time it took, the exhaustion, and the ease with which you could move behind it because Richard Nixon did not have a hold over a wide swath of America at that point in the same way Donald Trump does. So it would not go away. What Gerald Ford did, he got a Profile and Courage Award from the Kennedy Center, from the Kennedy Library, from Caroline Kennedy, for having done what he did in the pardon that many people still disagree with. Yeah. But the point is that this is, and I think most Democrats do not want to see him pardoned. I also think a pardon of Donald Trump, in which a deal in which he gets to not run for president, is not necessarily good for Joe Biden, because there are a lot of people that think any of these Republicans would have a better shot at beating Biden than would Trump. And so there's that sort of angle to look at it too. So it's very, very loaded. Pence did say it was premature. Maybe it is, because he hasn't been indicted. He hasn't been convicted of anything, though he doesn't have to be.
So we're almost out of time, but I did want to ask you about this. You've had J.D. Vance, who is preventing judicial nominees from being confirmed, and the White House is now accusing Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville of putting the nation's security at risk as well. Apparently, he's a Republican, blocking more than 200 routine military promotions. He says that it's in protest of the Defense Department's policy to pay for travel costs for service members seeking abortion or reproductive care. But the White House is calling it shameful. They say that you shouldn't play politics with military readiness. Are these lawmakers doing a Trump protest kind of their own way? What's happening? Jim?
No, I mean, oh, sorry.
Michael?
No,
Jim,
go ahead, Michael.
Whoever, I don't know.
This is typical. I'll be very quick. This is typical. I mean, senators have this ability to do this, to hold up legislation. One senator can do it. These guys are doing it and hold up nominees and votes. It's an old Senate tactic. I don't think it's reflected. I don't think it's directly involved with Trump, certainly in Tuberville's case, because I don't think he's clever enough to do that, perhaps in Vance's case. But I think this is attention getting, and this is going in a way toward your base when it comes to Tuberville. To Vance, it's curious. I think it's attention seeking, and I think he will fall before Tuberville does.
And we haven't even touched what's going on in the House. I mean, this craziness in the House, where they've been claiming to have these tapes that show that Biden had taken bribes from Ukrainians.
Well, where are the tapes then? Where's the proof?
That's the
because
question.
They keep saying it and they offer nothing.
They have nothing, and now they say that guy who had the tapes is missing and hasn't been heard from for 3 years.
Yeah. The oligarch.
The oligarch who has the tapes. Yeah, it's and all this emanates from Rudy Giuliani. He is the person who supposedly had this information and pushed it to Congress, and they don't have it, and it just makes them a laughingstock, except for among that slim portion of people who only listen to, and probably not even Fox News. It's worse than that. It's actually the ones who listen to Newsmax and on the QAnon sites. It's only a very small portion. The polls do show that as opposed to those folks, the American population, independents and Democrats, which make up 65 to 70% of the population, believe Trump there are serious charges against Trump, and that these right-wing people are crazy and they're holding up government. And there's going to be a reckoning in 2024, even if we have doubts about Joe Biden because of his age, which many of us do. I really believe the vote, just like it was in 2020, the vote was against Trump and against these people, not for Joe Biden so much, that will hold up again in 2024. The vote will be against those folks.
Well, it's certainly hope so, because it seems like this fringe is kind of taking over. Maybe it's just because that's what we're hearing about, because it's so wild that's our focus.
Yeah, what to very quickly add to what you guys were just saying is that there are Republicans now in the House who are saying, it might be time to form some coalitions with Democrats, because this is going too far on the far right of our party, and that sort of thing appears like it could happen. Once you have one member of Congress say that, it's an important step.
Well, you saw some Republicans cross over to support Adam Schiff and vote against his censure. So that to me kind of says, okay, even they know they're going too far.
And the
Well,
debt ceiling. And the
Yeah.
debt ceiling was a vote that
Yeah.
included both Democrats and Republicans in a rebuke of, the right wing. And, that there's some hope there. We'll see how long it goes. I don't think any substantive stuff, big stuff is going to be done until 2024 because we're in an election cycle now, and they're not going to want to have any big successes for the Democrats. So they're going to do their best to put their heels in. But there's beginning to be some bipartisanship.
Jim, Avila, Michael Shure, thank you for giving us your time every Friday.
Thanks,
you guys
Kip.
are
Happy to
awesome.
do it.
Love you.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.